Hello, and welcome to the Heathen's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Siri Vincent Pluff, and I'm so glad you're here. This is the show where I explore heathenry through a queer lens. We will be talking about traditional witchcraft, runes, folklore, and so much more. Join us, won't you, as we journey to the ends of the 9 realms and back. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Heathen's Journey podcast. I am your host, Siri Vincent Pluff. So I'm going to keep this intro fairly short. Just pretty much here to give some context for the conversation in this week's episode. I'm really excited about this conversation. It's with Katy Swallow, who is a fantastic Twitter mutual, and it's just great. And it's all about ancestor work. You may have noticed that I've started a queer ancestor work blog series over at my website. I have a link in the show notes for the first in the series. The second is probably coming up kind of soon. And this is a great conversation that dovetails off of the conversation that I had with Lex Ritchie about ancestor work several episodes back. So as you can see, I've got ancestors on the brain. I've got spirits on the brain lately. I am teaching at Catland Books this February. So if you're listening to this episode as it is coming out, you probably still have some time to register for some upcoming classes. My first upcoming class is an intro to spirit contact. And that is just what it says it is. It is on Monday the 7th. If the day is not the 7th, it is Monday, the first official Monday of February. So I'm really excited about that. And I also have a lot of things happening over on my Patreon, which is one of the main ways that I am able to fund this podcast and fund the work that I do here. I also have dark and full moon ritual guides that go out every dark and full moon, or in the lead up to those 2 lunations. And I'm very happy about them. I'm very proud of them. I do have a dark moon ritual kit tier. So if you pay $45 a month on my Patreon, you get all of my Patreon content. Plus I mail you a dark moon ritual kit to go with the guide. So just so you know that is what's happening. So let's get into the introduction for this week's episode. So I am so happy to be speaking with Katy Swallow. Katy Swallow is a spirit worker, reader, mage, and reiki practitioner who tends to specialize in uncomfortable things. Death, grief, and intergenerational and ancestral trauma are her frequent companions. Her work can be accurately described as navigating the lines between everything. I love that way of describing her work. I also want to shout out that she has several classes on ancestor work coming up soon. They are not yet posted to her website, but they will be posted soon. So, go to her website, follow her on Twitter, do all the things so that you can see when her ancestor work and spirit work classes come out, because she's fantastic. And if you drive with this, if you like this conversation, if it feels good to you, then definitely do that. Definitely take some classes with her. She's brilliant. All right. So without further ado, I am going to kick this episode off. Hello, Katy. It is so good to have you on the podcast.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yeah. So for listeners who are not aware of your work or who don't know who you are, I've already provided a brief introduction, but why don't you introduce yourself and what you love to do and all of that?
So introductions are my favorite thing because I have a really hard time finding words to describe what I do.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite. But some of my primary professional skills, I would say, are that I work as a psychic and a medium. I also do a lot of work with people around ancestor work, connecting with ancestors, other assorted strange things relating to death. I'm trained as a death doula. I prefer the term magician for the magical aspect of things. I feel like sort of the way I learned things was getting pushed off of cliffs. And so some of what I do can sort of fall into that ceremonial magic camp, and some of it falls into the sort of feral hedge witch camp. And so it's just, I just don't really feel comfortable in any particular camp. So sometimes I refer to myself as a McCarthyian mage. I don't know how fair that is to Josephine McCarthy, but just because in reading her work, it was like, did I write this? Which is not to say that I have anything close to the experience that she has, but just that the way that she works, I'm like, that's what I do. So it's not necessarily a claim that I've been like trained by her or anything, but just that the way she works is very similar.
Yeah, she is fascinating. So for listeners who are not aware of Josephine McCarthy, please look her up. She is a fantastic occultist.
Yeah, and she's a really good resource too. She's got lots of great resources online, some free, some paid. So just a nice assortment of things for people to learn from.
Yeah, totally. So what pulled you into what I'm going to call largely your ancestor and death work?
That's a really good question. So there were actually a lot of things as a kid that came up, and not at all actually, when people are like, I always saw spirits as a child, like not even that kind of stuff. But like my grandmother used to take me to the cemetery. Every time I would go to visit her, we would go to the cemetery because she was sort of the self-appointed family gravekeeper, which now my parents do, actually. Interestingly, I'm like, oh, isn't that funny that it should come down through my parents? My mom was a geriatric social worker when I was a kid. So her specialty was working with elders, and she would take me to the nursing home with her to play the piano sometimes, actually.
Oh, cute.
For people. So that was fun. And actually my first paid job besides babysitting was working at one of the nursing homes as an activities assistant when I was like 15. But I grew up in a house basically where we had, the Roman Catholic Bible next to Elizabeth Kubler's books on death and dying. And it was just something we talked about. And actually this cracked me up. People used to be like, oh, you work with old people. That must be depressing. And my mom would be like, oh, you work with middle school kids. That must be depressing. Like,
yeah. Oh, I cannot think of a more dreadful thing than working with middle school children.
I love them. I raised them. I think that it just sort of speaks to like, people have to find the work that fits for them. And for me, death is comfortable. So
right. Well, we need people for whom death is comfortable because everyone dies. What are we going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And so then I actually got into genealogy for a really practical reason when I was a kid, because my dad is one of 15 kids. And I grew up 3,000 miles away from sort of the core of the family. So when I would go to visit my family every summer, I had no idea who these people were. I couldn't keep their names straight. And they all have nicknames. So like Glenn is Bobo, and Alethea is Lisa, but sometimes she's Duty. And then Arthur is Roki. And my dad doesn't go by his first name either. So it was really confusing. So when I was 9, I took a little notebook and I interviewed all my relatives. I got their names and their birth dates. And then my grandmother started telling me all these stories about all the older relatives that she grew up with, which was really, really cool. So I got a lot of, it was just sort of a matter of survival in a really large family. Also, when I was a kid, I remember my mom's father's cousin had done like 400 years of French Canadian family research. And this was before, I know, I just saw your face go, what? This was before the internet. So this guy did it the hard way. Like, he drove to Quebec, he drove around, he got all the files. And it's this huge book of the family, which was really, really interesting. Really, really interesting.
So listeners, just so listeners know, this is something that Katy and I share. I actually recently, my dad was like, "Oh, Siri, you're interested in ancestors, right?" And he handed me a 40-page email exchange between him and one of his very distant cousins from the early 2000s. And was just like, here. And it goes back 400 years, French Canadian history. Yeah. So like, literally very, very similar.
It's really neat. And some of the stories are really funny. Like, I love the story of my mother's first ancestor in Quebec, first settler ancestor in Quebec. And how basically he's the town drunk. Like, we're like, why do they call him Levine? Why is his nickname Levine? Oh, because he drinks a lot of wine. So apparently local quote unquote law enforcement would get called on a regular basis because this guy was having too many parties on his homestead.
Oh my God.
So you never know what you're going to find in those kinds of records. On the other hand, I have some branches of my family where it's really, really hard to find records. So it's, that's something we can come back to. But so other things, like, it's funny because when I look back on it now, I'm like, oh, look, all of those pieces of what I am now were already there. It's just that now I've pulled them all together in one place. So I also had I did have weird psychic stuff happen when I was a kid, but because my strongest psychic sense is actually clairsentience, so feeling things in my body, feeling things through my body, channeling. Channeling is way too easy for me, honestly. And that started to happen when I was a kid, and it freaked me out because it's like these sensations in your body that are not yours, and they're not yours. So what the heck are they? But because I wasn't immediately as clairvoyant, so I wasn't seeing things in my mind's eye per se. Well, I was, but I didn't realize what it was. It kind of just freaked me out. So that stuff, I kind of tried to block it out until I was a teenager. And then I was a teenager and I decided that trying things like self-hypnosis and progressive relaxation, like my mom taught me progressive relaxation for health-related reasons when I was really little. And so I sort of started combining those two things as a teenager, and astral travel happened accidentally, and that freaked me out. So I refused to meditate for at least a good decade after that.
Understandably so. When you're not expecting something like that, it's really jarring.
Yeah. So I get it. Like when people are like, this stuff scares me a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. I get it. So there were a lot of things. And then of course, when I was a teenager, my mom had a friend who came to live with us because she was getting a divorce, and she had oracle cards. So we got to learn about oracle cards and tell ghost stories over the dining room table. That was fun.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
because you're also a tarot reader.
I am. Yep.
And you specialize in Marseille, don't you?
They're my favorite. Yeah. I have a ton. I'm like looking at my shelf over there. I have so many decks. I started with Marseille, but it was confusing. Mm-hmm. So then I went back to rider style decks, which made learning easier, which is why when I'm teaching, I always just recommend, I'm like, just start with a rider deck. It's got pictures. Most people are visual learners. It's easier to do that way. Only twice in several years now of teaching tarot have I met I've met two students who immediately were like, oh, these Marseille decks make perfect sense to me. And I'm like, perfect, use them.
I'm currently making my way through the tome that is The Way of Tarot by Jodorowsky. And it is a lot. It's certainly a lot.
Yeah.
Was there any specific reason why you just decided to kind of work with Marseille after having learned on the Rider-Waite system, or where did that come from?
I think just a quest for versatility, because I like the idea of being able to pick up any deck and just use it immediately. So like when I say that I switch decks a lot, I really do. I've been on kind of a stint lately, actually, with this like little purple deck. Actually, this is so funny. This is just the everyday tarot deck. And it's this one like got absconded with by a neighborhood kid at one point, and then got like ripped up and thrown in it. Not ripped up, but like it got damaged and then got like ended up in a yard. And I don't know if you can see this, but it's like it's all taped together. But I love this deck.
Amazing.
I like find it out in a snowbank one day, and I'm like, oh, that kid did take it off the coffee table.
Yes.
But it's awesome. So yeah, quest for versatility, I would say. And just like, it's like learning languages. Like, I feel like when people, a lot of times you'll meet those people who are just really good at learning languages, and they're like, oh, I did Spanish. Well, it's close to French. I think I'll do that one too. Like it's that kind of thing. But I also, because I do have a Marseille deck that is a French deck, I do think that sometimes the ancestors are the same ancestors that wake me up with ridiculous French songs. I think sometimes are like, hey, use the Marseille deck. And I'm like, okay,
I was going to ask about that because, you know, the French ancestry, they're loud, I've found.
Mm-hmm. They are. But it's so interesting because, they're kind of, mine are rowdy. They like French drinking songs. Yeah. No surprise there. But as you and I both noticed, it's not always necessarily immediately easy to find resources about French magic specifically, which was fascinating to me.
Yes. So I'll just catch the listeners up because this is the first time that Katy and I are like talking face to face, and we're just having like all of these like sparkling moments of clarity. But like, so I apologize if this podcast episode feels all over the place. For us, it's not.
No, exactly.
So I have been, obviously this is the Heathen's Journey podcast. I'm very connected to my Nordic roots. I'm very connected to my Norse side of the family. And I consider myself a Nordic witch, a Nordic folk witch. And at the same time, my French Canadian ancestors have been loud and persistent. And so Katy and I have connected before on like, okay, like how do we find French Canadian folk magic? Like, how do we find specifically French folk magic, you know, that isn't, France was conquered so many times. So like, thinking about that as
there's
well.
There's a whole
like,
lot of just passing through.
Yep. Yeah. So it's super interesting to find. I personally want to go on a like little research rabbit hole digging for that, because I find it so fascinating that there are not materials really on it, other than probably like folk Catholic magic. But even then, that varied so widely based on region.
Yeah. The little tidbits, just like very, very few little tidbits that I found have been that kind of thing. But which resulted in a really funny conversation with a friend of mine who was, because her parents are, one of them actually grew up in Quebec, and the other one is a French Canadian person who grew up in New England. And her mom ended up one afternoon for us flipping through her cookbook to find a prayer that her family used for magical purposes. And we were just cracking up. She's like, okay, hold please. Mom is flipping through her cookbook.
There's something so just like perfectly folk magic about that though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. So I guess for kind of bringing it back to spirit work and like ancestor work, for someone who is just curious or just like beginning to kind of dip their toes into ancestor work, I know I always recommend that people start to kind of like write down their family members' names, maybe start to go back into, more recent history. I don't recommend that people start on ancestry.com just because then that becomes what you're doing instead of connecting with them more directly. But how do you typically recommend that people begin working on ancestor work?
It depends on the person a little bit. One of the things I do like about genealogy is that for people who are not already in the magical world, for people who are not already in that, I feel like it makes it accessible for them. So that's one thing that I do like. At least it makes it accessible for people who come from family groups that have records. I'll say that. Because it's not a perfect solution for every ancestor group or family group. But I do think it's accessible for people who are a little apprehensive or just new to spirit work. So that's one that I like for those folks. Setting up a little ancestor altar that is a separate little area. I feel like that's important, but I also always tell people you don't have to put assholes on your altar. We don't have to like all of our family members, whether they're dead or alive. And if somebody harmed you in some way, or you just don't like them for some reason, you don't have to put them there. The one exception I would say is that sometimes I have ancestors I'm not that thrilled with. And I'm like, oh, you and me got to talk. I'm putting you right here in the center of the ancestor altar. This is what's up today. It just depends on what you want to do. I just don't like people who have maybe been through a traumatic experience of some kind with their family to feel obligated to put that stuff front and center. Like you don't have to. Your ancestor altar, if you want it to be just all the sunshine and roses of everybody who loved you the most, fine. That's completely fine. It's perfectly valid choice.
I feel like working with those difficult ancestors is kind of like ancestor work 201 anyway.
Yes, definitely.
Start working with the people who were either kind to you in life or who are just lovely in their afterlife. And then,
or even just, I think that sometimes we also have some people, like I have a friend who's like, oh, I just feel really drawn to this great grandmother for some reason. I'm like, perfect. That's a great place to start. So, then it also kind of, so here's one of my other, I wouldn't call it a rule, but like a suggestion is that the idea of communication is important, because if you're going to, in Galatia and ancestor work, if you're going to summon someone, you need to be able to talk to them.
Right. Yes.
So if you, it's good. It's funny because actually this is so funny. It makes me think of the time that I was 9 years old and I didn't know that people in my family still spoke French. And my mother sent me inside and said, oh, go get on Alice and tell her that it's time for dinner. And I was like, okay. So I run inside and, this lady who's probably 90 something is sitting there. And I'm like, Alice, it's time for dinner. And she responded in French and I freaked out because I didn't know what was going on.
Yes. Oh my God.
She just responded to me. I just think it's hilarious that she thought like a 9-year-old in whatever year it was, but anyway, it was just funny. And so then after dinner, then I heard everybody speaking this other language and I was completely flabbergasted just as a 9-year-old because I didn't know that my grandfather spoke another language, which now is really funny to me because he had an accent.
Right.
But my point is, it's good to be able to communicate with them. And that was a really sort of a funny introduction to that for me as a kid with living relatives was just, oh, I don't know how to communicate with you. But it doesn't have to be through language. I use these all the time. I use my tarot cards. Mm-hmm. And you can sit down. You can have this is what I love about cards. You can have no experience with anything involving communicating with spirits whatsoever. And you can sit down and go, hey, relative who passed, who I would like to speak with, here's a question. Ask them a question and flip a card over and see what you think it means to you. It's funny, it's the moon. I know what that's about. So, you're not maybe going to feel totally fluent in that language at first because it is learning a new language, but that's okay. And I tell people that all the time. I'm like, this is a long-term relationship you're developing. It's not a moment. It's not, it can be if you want it to be, but ideally I feel like you're going to get best results and most satisfaction from from developing a long-term relationship. So I think that's important in the beginning too, like sort of thinking of it that way and being like, oh, this is a relationship and I don't have to be perfect at this at the beginning. So setting up altars, and an altar, sometimes people have, I don't know if your listeners will have this issue, but for some of my clients, it's an issue where they're like, well, I'm not religious. And I'm like, it's just a special space you're dedicating to a thing that you care about. It doesn't have to be religious. Let's see, those two things, family stories, writing down family stories. What did your family tell you? And of course, this is just obviously genetic ancestry we're talking about, which there's other types of ancestry, obviously, but like with genetic ancestors, what are the stories that you heard growing up about different people? My favorite part of this is how different people tell different versions of the same story. And you're like, and all of it's partially true. That's the best part. But you learn something about, even if it's not true, because I have some relatives that are like very creative storytellers, shall we say?
Oh, same.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I know that a whole bunch of this isn't true, but here's what it tells me about that person. I feel the same way about spirits too. So like when I'm actually speaking with or using my cards with spirits, I always accept that it's a little bit, again, this is like the 201 or 301 zone, but like I always just accept that what they're telling me may require further validation, or I may just have to accept it as their subjective account of this thing. And that's fine. It's more information than I had before I talked to them.
I think that's a really important point because so I grew up in an area where there were very angry spirits. Like the land spirits were incredibly angry. The like people who had died there were very, very angry. It was just like a really like weird place to grow up as a psychic. Because when I left, I was like, why is it so quiet? Because, it was just
my sister and I had the same thing happen with the house that we grew up in, which I think was there was something weird going on with the land because weird stuff happened at the neighbors' houses too. And it was a new house when we moved in. When my parents moved to a new house, my sister, I walk into the house and my sister goes, so how do you like it? And I went, oh my God, she goes, it doesn't feel weird here, does it? And I'm like, oh my God. Like, yes. We didn't know that such a thing was possible because we grew up in this weird house.
Yes, exactly. But growing up in that like weird kind of spirit soup, which is how I describe my hometown's psychic realm, psychic inhabitants, like it made me have really firm boundaries with spirits.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it also made me be like, okay, like talking to a spirit is like talking to a person. They are not objective. They are subjective. They have a personality. They have an angle sometimes if they want you to do something. Like it's really important to keep in mind. And I think that also in a weird way, I don't know if that is like making it scarier for beginners or making it less scary, because I feel like it's just talking to a person can be really comforting, but at the same time, you're talking to a person and
you are. I do think it's good practice for practicing boundaries though. And I think that a lot of the reasons that ancestor work is useful are also things that relate to setting boundaries. So for example, a lot, and these are things are really common. So let's just like go down the list of intergenerational traumas. I mean, we don't have to go into detail, of course, but like, sexual trauma, other types of abuse, people with difficulty with emotional regulation of different types, things that people did as a matter of survival that were maybe not kind to their loved ones. All kinds of different situations, which are everybody has them somewhere in their family, in their ancestry. And those things often create situations where maybe we learned that it wasn't okay to say no, or maybe we learned that it wasn't okay to disagree with people. And I feel like ancestor work just gives us more of a chance to practice those skills that are really important with living people too. That's actually one of the reasons that I like to suggest to people that they set up an altar, because it is a space with boundaries, and that it is separate from other things. Like sometimes folks will be like, oh, I have their pictures on my bookshelf. And I'm like, that's lovely. Create a separate space. That's not a hard and fast like law of ancestor work. That's just one of my things that I like to do. And for a long time, I had like a really messy, it was like deities, ancestors, metaphysical vomit of an altar. And I just found over time, it was fine while it was evolving. But over time, I just found, I was like, oh no, I need boundaries on this space for this reason. I need boundaries on this space for this reason. These two things don't go together for these other reasons. Like just separate it all out. It's like keeping a tidy workspace. My workspace for my metaphysical stuff, my workspace for interfacing with deities over here, my workspace for dealing with my bills is in the office. Like different separate workspaces, I think is just sort of I feel like it's good energetic hygiene, generally speaking. So I think that's probably a good umbrella to put that under. But as far as, beginning stuff, like, I'm like, do you have things that you owned that an ancestor had? Like, because people will be like, what do you put on an ancestor altar? Well, if you have photographs, that's great. Not everybody does. If you have things that remind you of someone, like, gosh, let's see. I'm like, I don't have my ancestor stuff up on this table right now, but I'm like, so I do have a picture of one of my ancestors sitting right over there. Oh, I have a little Scottish thistle pendant that I like to keep on my ancestor workspace. That I actually attached to a rosary, because I had this one line where a bunch of like Protestants and Catholics all married each other. And I was like, cool, you can all exist on the same rosary. Good luck, guys. They liked it. It was fine. I have a ring that my grandmother gave me from my great grandmother. I have ancestors who were herbalists. So sometimes I have plants in my ancestor space. Or just maybe for a little while, I'll have a plant there. Like I have an olive tree sitting right there. Just different things. I like candles just because I like the idea of illumination of family history. There's no bigger reason. It's just illumination. Sometimes I will do rituals where I use fire for other purposes, for other intents. But for an ancestor altar, I think it's just legit to have a candle that's like, I am bringing light here. Also, because a lot of the reason that I do this work is to illuminate the dark corners. Mm-hmm. So many dark corners, Siri. So many dark corners. So many more than I could have anticipated in the beginning.
Yes.
Those things I think are important, but also if you, something I think in the terms of boundaries that's important too is people who are a little bit sensitive to energy, who may be able to feel that there are people in their space. Because the second you start talking to ancestors, they do sort of tend to like come into your space a little bit more energetically. Because they're stoked.
Yes.
They're like, yes, we've been waiting all this time for you. Like, we've been waiting to cheer you on. That sometimes it's okay if you're not comfortable with it being in your space to say, hey, could you give me some space? I need that. And also, honestly, it's completely fine too to say it in less polite ways, which I have many times.
Yeah, I really like Kari Toring's Frith and Griff models that she uses for boundaries, which are like, there are people who are in your frith who are, always allowed to, like, for me, that's my spouse. And then in the Griff guard, it's people who are sometimes allowed. And then like in the Oot guard is where the never allowed people are. And I even was talking with her once about it, or maybe it was on one of the videos of her Frith and Griff class. But she said, if an ancestor wants to talk to you while you're driving in a snowstorm, you can say, hi, bad time. Let's talk later.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it.
It is completely okay to have those boundaries.
And there's a difference between, so sometimes I think when the term ancestor veneration, wonderful word, implies a certain amount of respect That said, it's a relationship. Respect doesn't have to mean always deferring to what they want or always deferring to their expectations. It doesn't mean tolerating abuse. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I feel like for me, ancestor veneration is just one small part of what it is. Visiting graves, if those are available to you, that's another place I love to start out. But again, different tools are going to work better for different people. But creating a space for them, thinking about where you want your boundaries to be, thinking about who the ancestors are that you want to connect with. If it's your radical queer ancestors, great. If it's your mother's family line, great. If it's tarot readers, great. If it's people who are the past teachers of healing, like people who do Reiki, we'll talk about the Reiki master guides. That's a thing. So thinking about who you want them to be. And one of the things I'll say about that, though, is that sometimes folks want to shy away from the genetic family, sometimes for really good reasons, difficult experiences, trauma, etc., or just don't like them. That's also valid.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be trauma. Just, I don't like those people. They're gross. But I will say sometimes that's actually, for me, been a reason to connect with those people, because it is a little bit different connecting with ancestors, or at least learning about them, versus dealing with those living people who are still having living people agendas. Mm-hmm. Which isn't to say that ancestors don't have agendas, but one of the things that I do most of the time is I will ask to work with my ancestors who are healed enough to help. I know that a lot of people define the ancestors who are worth working with in different ways. I've heard exalted ancestors, I've heard venerated ancestors, I've heard those who lived and died well. The thing is, plenty of my ancestors didn't live well, but they died just fine. So,
yep. And I also think from my own experiences with the ancestors that things can continue to shift after death, and they often do. Yes. And so you might be really surprised who you are able to speak with. And of course, if there's someone who is a specific abuser or whatever, like, fuck them, you don't need to talk to them. But like, if there is somebody who you weren't very close to in life and they have passed away, don't write them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even older ancestors who, like your greats, who have actually like kind of kept up and are supportive. And yeah. I have a really special ancestor with my great-great-grandmother, or in my great-great-grandmother, who I call my ancestor teacher, who was a practitioner of all kinds of fun, magical things, and has been happy to share those things with me. What's really funny is that she is an absolutely uncompromising, unpleasant person in a lot of ways. And I have been to other psychics where I'm sitting there in a reading room and I don't even mention her. And they go, "Who is this woman that's with you?" I'm sitting there in Las Vegas a few years ago at a psychic, and I'm sitting there and she goes, I see her just kind of start to like go like this, like looking next to her. And then she goes, "I don't know who this woman is, but she just called you a stubborn bitch." And I said, "Oh, yes, I know who that is. And I know why she's saying that. And she's correct." Amazing.
But she's taught me amazing things. And and she, honestly, like, I'm just going to say it. I think she was probably a terrible mother for a lot of reasons. Like, her daughter, my father's grandmother, I'm like, I can't imagine having her as a mother. She's so unrelentingly perfectionistic. It's like nobody could live up to this. But I've kind of got her number. I have a perfectly fine relationship with her. And I know when to push back. And she respects that about me, that I push back. So she also knows she needs me because there's some serious stuff on that family line that and that's why she sought me out. Right. So if she wants me to do the work, we have to find the balance, and we do. One of the other really great entry points that I love is folklore.
Yes.
So if you don't know who they are, if there are no records, if your family history got lost for some reason, or like in my family, I had a cousin I was doing some genealogical work for, and all of those records got burned down during the Civil War. All right, no more records. Or let's say your ancestors were enslaved people and those records just don't exist. If you know something about where they came from, you can learn their folklore, you can learn their traditions. And as you progress on your ancestor journey, and as you further develop your communication tools, you can then get into more detail with them and ask them more questions about the things that matter to them in their lives. But just as a starting point, just learning their cultural context. For me, that's meant a lot of Irish folklore. Whew. It's meant, which is actually really fun to read.
Yes.
It's meant a lot of Jewish history, Jewish folklore, actually starting a Jewish conversion process. It's been a whole thing.
Yes. I was actually going to ask you about that. So let's put a pin in it.
Yeah. It's meant a lot of different things, but it has been very meaningful to me to learn about all those different folklores. For my French Canadian relatives and ancestors, Catholicism honestly was such a huge part of their lives that respecting that, learning more about that. I make lots of rosaries. It helps me feel connected to them. It's also kind of meditative. And also understanding, just different things about how that impacted, French Canadian society, because the Catholic Church really had a very strong hold on things there until about the 1920s. So understanding those things, just the cultural context, has given me so much. Also, because I am someone who's further down the path with the direct communication with spirits, it makes things make sense to me. So like, for example, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to, so basically there's a couple of, I'm not a big Wheel of the Year person.
Right. Me neither.
But there are certain Wheel of the Year events where my ancestors kind of lose their nuts a little bit. So one of them is Imbolc.
Yes.
The other one is Bealtna. And I'm really slow. It took me a while to figure out why all these weird things were happening on those days. And then I looked it up and then was like, oh, I'm an idiot.
Oh, this thing that a lot of other witches a lot of witches celebrate today, oh shit.
Yeah. And it directly related to, because those things are based in not even necessarily quote unquote witchcraft, but just the cultural context of, everything that was happening in the Ireland and the rest of the geography over there. It's just wicked funny. I just feel so dumb sometimes, honestly, because this stuff will pop up and I'm like, oh.
Oh, that's the thing that I've been trying to get through my head for 3 years. I do the same thing though, honestly. I think that you said something really interesting a while back that I want to pull out a little bit, because I think that a lot of people, if you've heard my podcast, if you have heard of the concepts of Urlog or
just kind of like if you have a curiosity about ancestor work, people refer to healing ancestors, or they might refer to ancestors meeting me, for a specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of tease that out. Like, what does that look like for you? And also, I know that you work with clients around this stuff. So what does it look like when you're working with clients as well?
What I find a lot of times with both clients and myself is that this isn't the only time this happens, but oftentimes when we find ourselves in a moment in life where we're dealing with a particular issue, ancestors who have also dealt with this particular issue are suddenly banging on your door. And it's like, this is so weird. What is this about? So that's oftentimes what starts it off with clients. It's pretty fun when it's with clients who don't normally do stuff like this too. Because I'll be like, oh, ancestors. And they're like, oh, weird. What's that? What's that about? Who are they? What do they want? And I'm like, this is where the genealogy thing comes in handy. Because if somebody's got no other context and they do have that tool available to them, I'll be like, okay. When I have certain, in the language that I've developed with my guides and my cards, there are certain, it's almost like there's a there's like an ancestry/family history language in the cards. So a lot of times I can like pretty immediately identify which family, where to start, mom's side or dad's side. Once we go with mom's side or dad's side, is it mom's mom or mom's dad? And I'll just keep going. Because if they're not, I'll go through it really mechanically like that, sort of with the cards and with my guides to try to get people to the point where I'm like, oh, this person, this family group, this issue, dive in, go nuts.
Yeah.
Because usually it's just a matter of something needing to be recognized so that a person can move past what's happening in their present. So let's say that a person felt really trapped in a marriage and they're getting a divorce. Suddenly their great-great-grandmother is screaming at me in the middle of the reading going, hey, we have to talk. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because I was in an arranged marriage and it was horrifying and I was trapped. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about this family group, because what this person is telling me is that they felt very trapped in marriage. And the person will say, oh yeah, it was an arranged marriage. And then I go, didn't you just say you're getting a divorce because you felt trapped in a marriage? And they're like, oh.
Yeah.
The healing part comes in first, I think, because the ancestor is there to say, hey, we have this thing in common. B, you have choices available to you that I didn't have. That's very, very common. Knowing that, make your choices and know that I support you. It's like it turns into this sort of reciprocal loop, right? With issues like that. With issues with other types of things, I will say that I think in part because of who I am, because of who my guides are, there is a lot of family sexual trauma that will come up. In those situations, a lot of times what they need is the acknowledgement. They need you to know that this happened, because the silence was the trap. They need you to know. So sometimes it's about acknowledgement. Sometimes it's about completing a task. I am not even joking that I had an ancestor ask me to become a Christian clergy member so that I could grant them a posthumous divorce.
Holy shit. Damn.
And I'm like, I'm still in negotiations on that one, because I'm like, I understand the goal, I understand the reasons, I understand the context, I understand the trauma. How do we figure this out?
Right. Yeah. Considering like everything that you were going through in life and your own faith that may or may not be Christian, like that's a lot to ask.
Yeah. It's a
Big
big
ask.
ask. Yeah. And but I like things like that because I'm like, I understand why I'm being asked this for a bunch of reasons. And I understand, it's just a good chance to assess your own boundaries again of like, what am I willing to do? Because whoo.
Right. Yeah.
But it's so in terms of the healing, there's different types of healing and it's contextual, but the patterns that I see typically have to do with acknowledgement, connection, acknowledgement. Also the intergenerationality, learning that. Because I sometimes, in order to take tarot speak here, in order to take the tower down, you have to be able to see the walls.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes people really don't see the walls because it takes time. So sometimes I feel like I'm sent as a reader to go tap, tap, tap. Look, there's a wall here.
Mm-hmm.
And people will go, I don't see a wall. And I'm like, it's there. Let's come at it from another angle.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, guides, how do I retell this story? Because, for example, again, let's say maybe somebody has a hard time speaking up for themselves at work. Let's say their grandparent was an alcoholic. So they come from a family where hiding things was a high priority and where it wasn't safe because people would be angry with you if you said something and then suddenly you're at work and you're afraid to contradict people. You're afraid to say no to your boss. You're afraid to say no to coworkers. You hate your job because you feel like nobody listens to you, but you're also not speaking up. It's even in little ways. I feel like ancestors do that a lot. And I feel like it's a multi-directional healing because it takes that energy of that toxic silence and just sort of like releases it. It's like the second you open your mouth, that energy starts to come out of that whole family line through your body. And it's like, the way that I experience it, because I'm so clairsentient, is it'll feel like a purge of energy. So when I'm working with other people, I can feel it before it happens for them. I'm like, oh, it's sitting right here.
Right.
And sometimes it's trippy as heck because they'll be like, oh, that's so weird. I keep having this strange sensation in my stomach and I can't figure out what it's about. And I'm like, at which point I always go, if you think you have a medical issue, please call a doctor. That said, let's talk about spiritual stuff.
Right. Yes.
Sometimes, like my sister and I, when I went she lives in Las Vegas. So that's why I was visiting that psychic in Las Vegas. Because when I travel, I always visit a psychic. But, being at her house, she does her stuff differently. She does similar things to what I do, but she just has her own spiel. So she's got a Marian shrine in her backyard, and we do rituals at her Marian shrine. Just sort of classic release rituals, burning stuff, cutting things, things like that when we're out there. Also just making her shrine beautiful because it's pretty.
Yes.
So sometimes I find that the way that these things hold in the body can be really interesting. I remember working with someone whose family had family members who were lost in the Holocaust. Mm. One of those family members was pregnant at the time. Mm. There was a lot of grief, a lot of layers, obviously. One interesting thing about Jewish law is that for an infant that is less than a month old, there's no burial protocol. Like, not in the way that there is for adults anyway. But there's still grief there that a family would have over losing this child.
Yeah.
So going through those different processes, and what was interesting is in that case, that person ended up, I used Reiki actually as a tool, different types of energy healing. I recommend stuff like acupuncture, energy work, all kinds of things, even massage, because our bodies house energy. And when we did a Reiki session on this person. It was like energetically, they gave birth to something.
Wow.
And it was really interesting to be sitting there with them and have them go, oh my God, there's a baby.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know. So we kind of had to like work through that process and talk about it, talk about what happened, and talk about just the whole thing. There was just a whole process. The other thing, when I say long-term relationship too, like I was saying that at the beginning, that's why it's important, because like with a situation like that, where there's so many layers of injury and hurt and violence, it's not always going to be like a first pass where you do the thing and then, oh, it's done. My ancestors are all healed now. Sometimes one particular incident will have multiple steps. Like that one had multiple steps that needed to be addressed. And sometimes it's not that deep. Sometimes it's not. But yeah, healing can take on many forms. And I think it's important to include the physical body in that process as well, because it gives us clues.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was saying, sometimes I'll start coughing when I talk about certain aspects of family history. Sometimes when I'm doing energy work on other people, they'll experience physical things as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, sometimes it's little rituals. Sometimes it's writing those stories, writing the stories you learn and sharing them with other family members. Using energy work to sort of connect and move things through the body. Yeah, I feel like there's so many, like contextually, there's so many interesting things you run into. But for a lot of people, especially people who maybe aren't super deep in magic yet, just writing things and sharing them can be really, really great. And I find that generally speaking, ancestors really appreciate that. And the ones that don't like you talking about it are an indicator that you need to talk about it.
Yes. Oof. I think it's interesting too when ancestral trauma like lives in the body. I mean, we already know, like there have been scientific studies that, intergenerational trauma like is passed down through like physical ailments in the body. Like, a really famous example was Jewish people whose family survived the Holocaust, but others did not. Like that trauma passes down, and also for African American
absolutely
people, like that trauma passes down.
And what I love is that science is catching up with that and studying it. I'm like, yes.
It's fascinating to see like the actual like connections and stuff. I don't know. I find it so fascinating. Especially as someone with a pain condition myself. It's really interesting because, and my pain condition is fibromyalgia, which granted, okay, so like I just gave an actual diagnosis, like all the legal things I have to say, like I'm not saying that you can diagnose yourself with things or, anything like that. Listen to your doctors, please. But fibromyalgia is unexplained pain in the body.
Yeah.
And the fact that I have been doing so much more ancestor work since the onset of my fibromyalgia is just a connection that I'm trying to tease out right now.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at things like, so the ACEs study, which is a really big study that Kaiser Permanente did on like tens of thousands of people. I can't remember how long ago it came out. I think it was in like the last decade. ACEs, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So in that study, they basically looked at things like if certain adverse childhood experiences happen, and it could be everything from parents getting divorced to having an incarcerated family member to, experiencing abuse of some kind. Like there's a wide range of things that it increases your chances of experiencing certain things, like certain health outcomes. I'm like, go science. Keep gathering the data, friends. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start kind of winding us down. I'm sure this is the first of many conversations personally that you and I will have. But one thing that I cannot not ask, because we are so close to Halloween, is ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about ghosts, ghosty ghouls. So what is your experience with ghosts?
So as a kid, like I said, I was really uncomfortable with all of this psychic / ghost stuff. And I made a sort of a very angry rule to them at a young age that it was basically like, if I see you, God damn it, I'll make you sorry. It was kind of along those lines, except with more swearing.
Yes.
Because they would mess with me. I've been touched. I've been grabbed. I've been poked. I've been woken up. I've had my fire alarm set off repeatedly, and not because of a low battery. I've seen them out of the corner of my eye. When I see the dead, I tend to more see them in my mind's eye. I think because I've been really clear about it's mostly at this point, I just don't like having my startle response triggered constantly because my body I can't shut it off. So if I see someone in my kitchen and I'm like, oh my God,
right.
That's not cool with me, and it's not good for my mental health. Thank you. So, so that's like my one hard and fast rule. As long as they're around and not around because of a need to be moved along for some reason, because if they need to be moved along, I'm just going to cross them over. That's what I do. Mm-hmm. If not, I'm fine with them being around. But I definitely have some pretty crazy ghost stories. Yes, when I go to cemeteries, and I love going to cemeteries. Some mediums hate it. I love it. It's my favorite thing. And it's not like I show up and there's like 200 ghosts just hanging out. It's more like I'll walk by a certain grave and hear someone giggling, and then they want to chat for a minute. And I'm like, that's cute. We can talk. Or they'll pull me when I go to graveyards where I have ancestors, or I suspect I might. They'll pull me to a grave, and I'm like, found it. Oh my gosh, the weirdest stuff used to happen in my house when I was a kid. Just the damn weirdest stuff. Doors opening and closing, voices, conversations. And my mom says this used to happen in the house that she grew up in also. I'm like, guess this is just a thing we do. When I was younger, it made me so uncomfortable. Now I'm just more like, okay, who is it?
I'd rather know your name. Come on.
I'd rather know your name. And then, of course, if you work with deities, then it's just like a whole extra layer of fun, because it's like, oh, you guys get oh my God, I'm trying to think of like a specific story, but the ancestors at my parents' house at Therahoot, my great grandmother decided that she was tired of her jewelry being locked in my mom's closet. And so for like a week, every time one of us walked by that closet, which, just for the record, is a very, very tightly closed door that does not rattle and it is not loose in any way, it would sound like, and it's like old New England wooden door with like loud doorknob. Every time we would walk by that door, it would just be like, like somebody's trying to get out of the door, and it would just be like, what the fuck? What's going on? But it was happening to all of us separately. And finally one night, like I knock, this was like last year, and I knock on my parents' door, and I'm like, are you guys awake? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, did you just hear that out the hallway? And I was like, I think it's Alma, and I don't know what the hell is in that closet. And my mom goes, oh, I have a bag of her jewelry in there I haven't sorted yet. Damn. So we got up, she got out of bed, and we went and got it and sorted through her jewelry, and then it was nice and quiet after that. But now they know that they can rattle that door to get our attention, and it's like, it's all over now. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. So I grew up in a haunted house as well, but it was not haunted by an ancestor as far as I know. It was just haunted by someone who had died on the property. And this was also a new house. Like, it was built in the 80s. So, you know, a lot of people, when I would say, oh, I grew up in a haunted house, they'd be like, oh, but it's not that old. Like, no, it doesn't matter if it's old or not, the land has been there. There's a possibility for spirits. And so all throughout my childhood, I would like have talked to the ghost, and like one of my favorite games with my best friends as a kid was Ghost Hunters. And they were playing and I was not. And so we would go.
It's like when my friends would get out Ouija boards and I would be like, I'll just be over here. Thanks. Yeah. I don't have a problem with Ouija boards, but when I was a kid, I was so uncomfortable and I could feel stuff. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I actually have never worked with a spirit board or a Ouija board at all, and I'm very curious to do so. But a lot of people are very hesitant to work with it. So I just haven't had the opportunity to play around with one. Anyway, so I kind of continued just casually talking about the ghosts that I grew up with. And, you know, my parents always thought, oh, they'll grow out of it. You know, like it's fine. This is just a phase of really loving ghosts. Yeah. And then when I was a teenager, I had a really horrible experience, which is actually very personal. So I'm not going to go into super depth, but basically like I had like a paralysis situation where like the ghost like acted out something through my body, and it was horrifying. As somebody who also experiences what is it when they touch you?
Oh, when they touch you, or I think I've seen the word clairtangent. Clairtangent. I can't do that word.
Something physical. Anyway, so that was like a really traumatic experience that is still very personal. I'm still working through. But after that, she didn't really come around for me anymore. But that was when my mom saw the ghost for the first time. My mom would actually like see her like going around corners. Like one morning, my mom always woke up at like an ungodly hour in the morning because she wanted time alone, which now that I'm an adult, I totally understand. But she would wake up at like 5:30 in the morning. And so she was in the living room at like 5:30 in the morning, and she thought that I had woken up early. And she was like, "Oh, Siri, hi." But it wasn't me. And then like the ghost disappeared. And so she has like actual really real, like, oh my God, I'm seeing a ghost. And I was like, yeah, Mom, I've been telling you for the last like 15 years, as long as we've lived in this house, I've been telling you that it's haunted. And that was wild. So that's like my experience of haunting. And I don't have access to that home anymore. My parents don't live there anymore, but I have thought about going and speaking to that spirit now that I have many more skills to do so, just to be like, girl, what's going on? Like, I want to know. You haunted me. Like, I deserve to know.
Also, see, the house that I grew up in, which was weirdly haunted and uncomfortable, is not the same one that my parents live in now, which is amusingly haunted.
Right.
The uncomfortable house, interestingly, someone who moved into the house after us ended up getting arrested for a really, really strange crime. And I think about that sometimes, because that house, that haunting, that was not our ancestors. Like when I think about the stuff that was happening in that house, I'm like, something on that land was very angry. I did not have, as you said, like I did not have the skills to communicate with it at the time, or to create a relationship with it, or to even attempt that. It felt scary, and I didn't like it as a kid. And I think about that sometimes, that this guy then did this weird thing.
I'm so curious, but we can also talk about it off air.
Yeah.
All right. So, if there is one thing that you hope that listeners take away from this conversation, what is it?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I guess I would say that it's a journey. It's a journey of relationship building and skill building. Mm-hmm. And both of those things are important. And the reason that framing is important is so that you remember to be kind to yourself, because it's a learning process.
Yeah. Be kind to yourself. And we just talked about some scary haunting stories. So I will say this: always remember that you are the one with a body.
Absolutely.
And therefore, you can just tell them to fuck right off.
Absolutely. I've said that before. I've said, look, I'm alive. You're dead. Go fuck yourself.
Right. So like, if you're having a scary, haunting experience, you know, and when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, like this amazing and terrifying thing is happening and I have no power. No, you actually do have power.
Absolutely.
Just like communicate with the thing and tell it to go away.
Yeah.
Because you can. And I want people to kind of come away from this conversation not being scared, but just realizing, oh, there's this whole world that it's possible to dig into.
Yeah. And the more I learn about it, the less scared I've been about it. It was when I didn't know anything that I was constantly terrified. The more I learned and the more I settled into it and the more I accepted that I have the abilities and the skills that I do. Yeah, I just feel, I mean, I slept with the covers over my head until I was 27 because I had so much weird stuff happen to me when I was younger and it just freaked me out.
Yeah.
I'm so much more comfortable now and grateful, really. Like now I'm grateful for the very things that freaked me out when I was a kid. I'm like, I just feel so lucky to have this experience in the world because it's given me so many more layers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So many more layers of understanding of the world around me.
It's really a blessing to have spirit friends. You know, I have embodied friends and I have spirit friends, and that's just how my life is now.
Yeah, it's neat.
All right. So if people want to work with you, where can they find you?
I have a website. It is very simple. It is katyswallow.com. Katy with a Y, swallow like the bird.
Nice. I'll put a link in the show notes to it as well. And
awesome.
Your Twitter handle, if that's okay.
I think it's either K Swallow Tarot or Katy Swallow Tarot. That's funny. I think it's K Swallow Tarot.
I'll put that in the show notes as well so people can follow you there. I know that you're always sharing like interesting tidbits on Twitter.
Yeah, I get my thread on big time.
Yes, we love to see it. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today, Katy. It was a joy to talk to you.
Thank you.
And that is it for today's episode of the Heathen's Journey podcast. A huge thank you and shout out to all of my students and patrons for making this work available. If you want to become a patron and support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com/northernlightswitch. I post full moon and new moon ritual guides, rune readings for each of the turning of the zodiac season, and so much more. If you would like to follow me in between episodes, you can find me on Instagram at northern.lights.witch or on Twitter at northlightwitch. Until next time, stay weird.